Welcome to Rendering an Animation. In this video you will learn how to render your animation, how to stop the rendering, what settings to use for good results, and how to preview an animation once it has finished rendering. So let's hop straight on over into Blender. Now some of you observant students would have realised that under the render menu there's this button called Render Animation with the shortcut Ctrl and F12. Now don't touch it because we're not ready to render the animation just yet. We need to do some setting changes first, especially as this is our first animation. So what to do? Well, first of all, let's go over to the render properties and look through this. So we've got a lot of options here. First of all, your device that you're rendering on. If you've worked out that your GPU is faster than your CPU, make sure it's on the GPU. Scrolling down a little, under dimensions we have the resolution and the percentage of final resolution. So this is going to be 50% of 1080p essentially. Now obviously the higher that is, the more resolution there is, the higher the image quality is going to be. However, it's also going to take longer to do. We're going to leave the frame rate as it is, that's absolutely fine. And if we scroll down here, we have an output folder. Now that is very important. That tells Blender where it's going to put your information. Now, contrary to what it feels like down here when we select on what to save it as, at the moment it's PNG. And we go, oh, there's lots of video options here. Surely we select that? The simple answer is no. The reason for that is it's much better to make your animation an image format, so you end up with, in this case, 120 images, and then compile them into one single movie later on. If for whatever reason you do decide to use one of these movie options, and then later on during this 5-hour render that you're about to do, something goes wrong, you have a power cut, anything that stops the render will kill your file completely. However, if you had finished off rendering 50 out of the 120 frames, and you would have 50 pictures on your computer. And so if your computer crashed, Blender crashed, you lost power, whatever reason, you don't have to worry, because on the next time you change this value here, you change the start value to 50 or 51, and you'd carry on. So there's a great reason for not having it render straight to a video. It also gives you more control doing it this way. And there's an additional benefit which we'll go over in a couple of lectures time, where you render across multiple machines. Very powerful. So the start and end frames are very important. That dictates how long the rendering is going to last for as well. We just hinted at that there. So anything beyond, any animation beyond the start and end, or before the start and end, won't actually make it to the final render. Of course, it's the camera settings as well that dictate what is being seen. Now, one final thing, and we've touched on it when we did our render tests earlier on, so we scroll all the way down to where it says performance. Now, you'll want to set this appropriately for your system. So, because I'm using a CPU, generally the smaller tiles are better, and you'll need a much larger tile size if you're using a GPU. Again, if you've not done the full test, I do suggest you do that, because now that we're rendering an animation, it's going to take several minutes to do. So now that I've got it to 16 by 16, I'm happy with everything else. Let's go to sampling. I'm going to do a test render to begin with. So on this samples here, I'm going to set the render level to just 1. Okay, that's good. Let's go up. Let's select an output folder. I'm happy leaving it as the temp at the moment because it's just an example, but you can go into here and select a specific location to store your animation on your hard drive. Now when we come to do our final animation, we'll actually pick a folder that isn't buried deep in your system. In fact, the temp folder itself is quite hard to get to on a Mac, a lot easier to get to on a PC. So in this case, I'm going to literally I'm going to put it in my downloads folder, I'm going to create a new directory there and set it as one sample lamp. And this is literally just to get a feel of our animation. So with that selected there, we can go ahead and go render and render animation. And we can see that because we've only got one sample, it is very quick to render out our animation itself. But it's still going to take several minutes. It's going to take at least 2 minutes. So I'll let this whiz ahead and I'll join you in a moment. Okay, so we're halfway through our rendering, and one of the things that I've noticed after watching this is because there's no reference material in the background, I'm not sure whether we know by looking at this whether the lamp is actually jumping at all. But let's that be gone. So I'm just going to stop the rendering at the moment, and there's a little cross here that will stop the rendering on the info header bar, and we can click that there and it just stops in place. Now if we go into our operating system, and I'm just going to find the sample lamp folder, bring this down for you, and we can see, oh, there's one PNG, we can actually go through these, I didn't mean to open that, and I'm down to 78, so at any point I can just continue from 78 onwards if I wanted to continue this particular render. So in the render menu itself, I can go to play rendered animation, and it will play where we got to. And then it will stop and repeat. Now we can see here there is a reference. There's just this thin band at the back. So perhaps in this case, I'm not going to add anything to our scene at the moment, but it just tells you here, even on this very rough and very grainy rendering, that there is something probably missing to give the viewer, the person watching this video, a clue, even though there is a dark band there. Now I don't know with more samples whether that's going to be more prominent. It's certainly obvious that it's jumping as soon as we swing round and see it landing again, but I'm not sure if it is at the moment. Anyway, so that's all of our stuff done. We've got a series of pictures. I'm just going to continue rendering this out. Where did we get to? We got to number 78. So if you need to stop for whatever reason, the great thing is here I can continue, and I'm just going to check 78. It's a whole picture. That's great. So I'm going to finish off the rest of my rendering by going down to here and typing in 78. Now once I've typed in 78, I can just go back to render and render animation, and off it goes and completes the rendering. Excellent, so the render's just finished, so we can hop back onto render and play the rendered animation, see how that's come out. And of course it's just going to play the last bit of our animation, which looks absolutely fine. Brilliant. So we have a quick look after doing that rendering. We see that there are 121 items in here, there's 121 pictures, and as we can see if we scroll down, they are of our lamp jumping. Excellent, so we've got all of our 121 frames all rendered out. And that means for you guys, it's a challenge time. I would like you to render a trial animation. So set up a one sample test folder to save to. Set your render samples to 1 and render your animation. Preview your animation and make sure you are happy with it. Pause the video now and give that a go. Welcome back. How did you guys get on? Did you have to go back and make some adjustments? Are you happy with that render, with that trial render? If you're not, if the camera's in the wrong position, if your model looks a bit odd, if you want to move something, do something else, now's the time to go back and make those alterations before we go ahead and render the full animation, which may take several hours to do. Right, so I might as well take this opportunity to go back to the 3D view, because one of my concerns was that with the background being so smooth, we might not actually be able to really grasp that this lamp is jumping up in the air. So I'm happy with the end and the start location, but this I'm not happy with, because it doesn't really convey that the lamp is actually going upwards. I could put something in the background that might help for reference, but in this case I can also help by just adjusting the camera. So let's pull it back down to the ground plane and zoom it out slightly. And we can zoom out by just moving. Oh, that's rotation, not location. There we go. And let's pull that across a little. That's up, so it's still in frame. Let's just see how that looks now. So let's play that animation. Oh, we're not at 0, so let's set it back to 0. So it's jumping up. That peaks just above the frame. I do want to keep it inside the frame, so let's just stop that from playing with the right key combination. So it jumps up a little bit there. So if we raise that up, which is Z ever so slightly. So that's wonderful there and here. And perhaps I will make this just a little bit more dynamic by starting slightly behind our lamp. So I'll start here, but this time rotate it round. So I'm starting like this. So in fact, the lamp is still going off there, so we're going to have to pull it this way just a little bit more. Right, let's try that. In fact, let's go down a little and just push it in a bit closer to the camera. So does that go off the camera? No, that's fine. Jumps up, stays in frame. That gives a much better impression of height. Okay, so I've made the changes that I like. I'm going to create a new folder. So let's go up a directory. I'm going to store this in my downloads for temporary use. I'm going to call it one sample test 2 lamp. You can call it whatever you like. And I'm going to set that as the location. And I'm going to hit render animation. And I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea whilst that renders out. Okay, so the render's all done, brilliant. And I've got a lovely cup of Earl Grey. How did you guys get on? Please keep your renders, your test renders that you've currently got, because not in the next lecture, but the one after that, you'll be able to export this to a movie to share with everybody. Brilliant. See you in the next lecture.